There is a moment that exists between seeing and being seen, a moment so brief, so imperceptible, that most of us pass through it 1,000 times without ever noticing its presence. It happens when you lock eyes with another person, a stranger on the street, a lover across the room, a child reaching for your hand. In that millisecond, something extraordinary occurs, something ancient and profound. You are no longer simply yourself. You become a reflection, a mirror, a mystery unfolding in the gaze of another consciousness. But here is the question that haunts us tonight, the question that will guide us through the labyrinth of the human heart. When you look into the eyes of another person, whose face do you truly see? Is it them, or is it you? Imagine for a moment that you are standing at the edge of a still, dark lake. The surface is perfect glass. No wind disturbs it, no rain falls upon it. You lean forward, searching the water, and there, suspended in liquid darkness, is a face, your face. But something is wrong. The eyes that stare back at you are not quite your eyes. The expression is familiar, yet foreign. The person in the water smiles, but you are not smiling. They weep, but your eyes are dry. This is not reflection. This is revelation. The ancient Greeks told a story about a young man named Narcissus who fell in love with his own reflection in a pool of water. We remember him as a symbol of vanity, of self-absorption. But what if we have misunderstood the myth all along? What if Narcissus was not in love with himself, but with the version of himself he could only see through the mirror of water, a self that existed nowhere else, that could never be touched, never be known directly? What if his tragedy was not loving himself too much, but never knowing himself at all? Tonight, we embark on a journey into the most mysterious mirror humanity has ever encountered. Not the polished glass that hangs on our walls, not the still water that reflects our physical forms, but the living, breathing mirror of other human beings, the mirror of relationships, the mirror through which we discover who we are, who we have been, and who we are becoming. This is a story about projection, about the invisible threads that connect one consciousness to another. It is a story about how we cast our inner worlds onto the people around us, how we see in others what we cannot yet see in ourselves. It is a story about love and hatred, attraction and repulsion, recognition and denial. But above all, it is a story about the strange and beautiful paradox that defines human existence. We can only know ourselves through the experience of otherness. We can only see ourselves by looking away from ourselves. For the next 2 hours, we will travel together through the hidden architecture of human relationships. We will descend into the unconscious mind, where ancient patterns lie dormant, waiting to be triggered by a glance, a word, a touch. We will explore the neuroscience of empathy and the philosophy of the other. We will examine how every person you have ever loved or hated has served as a mirror, reflecting back to you the parts of yourself you have chosen to embrace or exile. We will discover that you have never truly seen another person. You have only seen yourself, disguised in their form. And yet, and this is the mystery that makes everything worthwhile, in seeing yourself reflected in others, you somehow become more than yourself. You transcend the prison of solitary consciousness. You touch the infinite. The question we begin with is simple. Who are you? But the answer, as we shall see, requires us to ask a different question entirely. Who have you seen yourself to be in the eyes of everyone you have ever known? Let me tell you how this exploration will unfold. First, we will journey to the origins, to the birth of the mirror itself, both literal and metaphorical. We will discover how humanity first learned to see its own face, and how this simple act of self-recognition changed everything. We will trace the evolutionary roots of empathy, the mirror neurons that fire in your brain when you watch another person suffer or rejoice. We will meet the philosophers and psychologists who first understood that the self is not a fixed thing, but a fluid process of becoming, shaped and reshaped by every relationship we enter. Then we will descend into the darkness, into the realm Carl Jung called the shadow, where all the rejected, denied and disowned parts of ourselves wait in exile. We will see how these shadow elements do not simply disappear, but instead get projected onto other people, turning them into screens upon which we play out our inner dramas. We will witness how projection creates both love and war, how it builds bridges between souls and erects walls between enemies. We will understand why we are so often drawn to people who hurt us, and why we sometimes push away those who see us most clearly. From there, we will ascend toward revelation, toward the moment of awakening when projection becomes conscious, when the mirror reveals itself as a mirror. We will explore what it means to take back these projections, to recognize that the lover you idealized and the enemy you demonized were both you all along. We will discover how this recognition does not destroy relationships, but transforms them into something more real, more honest, more sacred. And finally, we will arrive at the threshold of a new understanding, a vision of consciousness itself as a collective mirror, where every human being reflects every other, where the boundaries between self and other begin to dissolve, where we glimpse the possibility that we are all reflections of a single, infinite awareness looking at itself through 7 billion pairs of eyes. But I must warn you, this journey is not comfortable. To see yourself in the mirror of relationships is to see everything, your beauty and your ugliness, your wisdom and your foolishness, your capacity for love and your capacity for cruelty. The mirror does not flatter, it does not lie. It shows you precisely what is there, whether you wish to see it or not. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre wrote, "Hell is other people." But he understood something profound. Other people are hell not because they torment us, but because they force us to see ourselves. They hold up a mirror we cannot escape, cannot smash, cannot ignore. In their presence, we are seen. And being seen is both the most terrifying and the most necessary experience in human existence. So let us begin. Let us step together into this hall of mirrors, this labyrinth of reflections, this theater where the drama of consciousness plays out across the stage of human relationship. Let us discover what we have been running from and what we have been running toward. Let us learn to see, truly see, for perhaps the first time. The face in the water is waiting, and it has something to tell us about who we really are. In the beginning, there was no mirror. Think about this carefully. For millions of years, our ancestors walked the earth without ever seeing their own faces. They knew their hands, their feet, their bodies through touch and movement. But their faces, the very center of their identity, the surface through which they expressed every emotion, remained invisible to them. They could see the faces of others, but never their own. They existed in a strange state of half-blindness, forever external to themselves. Until one day, perhaps 8,000 years ago, someone in ancient Anatolia, in what is now Turkey, discovered that polished obsidian, a volcanic glass, could capture an image. And in that moment, everything changed. For the first time in human history, a person looked down and saw themselves looking back. Can you imagine that moment? Can you imagine the shock, the disorientation, the uncanny recognition? The face in the obsidian was familiar. It had to be familiar because it matched the internal sense of self, and yet it was also utterly alien because it existed outside in the world, separate and strange. This was not just a technological innovation. This was a revolution in consciousness itself. The mirror did not merely reflect the physical form, it created something new, the observed self. Before the mirror, you could only know yourself from the inside, as a flow of sensations, thoughts, emotions. But the mirror split you in two. Now you are both subject and object, both the one who sees and the one who is seen. The mirror made you aware of yourself as an image, as something that exists in the perception of others. The ancient Egyptians understood this. They placed mirrors in tombs, believing that the dead would need them in the afterlife, not for vanity, but for identity. The mirror was a tool of self-recognition, a way of maintaining the coherence of the self even in death. In Egyptian philosophy, to see your reflection was to confirm your existence, to prove that you were still a distinct being in the cosmos. But mirrors remained rare and precious for thousands of years. Bronze mirrors in ancient Rome, silver-backed glass in Renaissance Venice. For most of human history, most humans never saw their own faces with clarity. They knew themselves through the reactions of others, through the smiles and frowns, the embraces and rejections, the words of praise and condemnation that came from the social world around them. They knew themselves as reflections. Now let us journey deeper into the biological substrate of reflection itself. In 1996, a team of neuroscientists in Parma, Italy, made a discovery that would revolutionize our understanding of empathy, imitation, and social connection. They were studying the motor cortex of macaque monkeys, mapping which neurons fired when the monkeys performed specific actions, reaching for food, grasping objects. But then, something unexpected happened. One day, a researcher reached for a peanut while a monkey watched, and the neurons in the monkey's brain, the same neurons that fired when the monkey itself reached for food, suddenly activated. The monkey wasn't moving. It was only watching, but its brain responded as though it was performing the action itself. They called these mirror neurons. And here is why this matters. Mirror neurons are the biological foundation of empathy. They are the reason that when you see someone smile, you feel a subtle impulse to smile. When you watch someone cry, something inside you responds as though you are crying too. Mirror neurons collapse the boundary between self and other. They create a neurological bridge where your brain simulates the internal experience of another person. You do not simply observe others. You become them momentarily at the level of neural firing. This is not metaphor. This is anatomy. When you watch a loved one in pain, the same neural networks that process your own pain light up in your brain. When you see someone caressed, the touch centers in your cortex activate as though you are being touched. Your brain does not fully distinguish between what happens to you and what happens to people you observe and identify with. In other words, at the most fundamental biological level, you are not separate from others. You are a permeable membrane. You are a resonance chamber. You are, quite literally, a mirror. But evolution did not stop with mirror neurons. It went further. Somewhere in the deep history of human development, perhaps 200,000 years ago, perhaps earlier, our ancestors evolved something unprecedented: the ability to hold complex mental representations of other minds. We developed what psychologists call theory of mind, the capacity to imagine what another person is thinking, feeling, believing, the ability to model their internal experience, to simulate their perspective. This was the birth of the psychological mirror. Think about what this means. You can close your eyes right now and imagine what your mother is feeling. You can picture a friend's reaction to good news. You can anticipate a stranger's response to your words. You do this effortlessly, automatically, constantly. But this ability, this capacity to hold another consciousness inside your own consciousness, is one of the most sophisticated cognitive achievements in the natural world. You are not just a body with a brain. You are a hall of mirrors containing within yourself representations of all the people you have ever known. Your mother lives inside you. Your father lives inside you. Your first love, your greatest enemy, your childhood friend, they all exist as internal images, as simulations, as mirrors reflecting different aspects of your own psyche. The psychiatrist D.W. Winnicott understood this profoundly. He observed mothers and infants and noticed something remarkable. The baby looks at the mother's face, and what does it see? Not the mother's true feelings, but the mother's reflection of the baby itself. When the baby smiles, the mother smiles back. When the baby shows distress, the mother mirrors that distress with concern. The mother's face becomes a mirror in which the infant sees itself, confirms itself, comes to know itself. Winnicott wrote, "The mother's face is the precursor of the mirror. Before you ever saw your physical reflection, you saw your emotional reflection in the face of your primary caregiver. And in that mirroring, or in the absence of that mirroring, your sense of self began to form. If the mother's face reflected you accurately and lovingly, you learned that you were real, that your feelings mattered, that you were worthy of attention. But if the mother's face was absent, blank, or reflected only her own distress, you learned something else, that you did not exist fully, that your emotions were invisible, that you had to suppress or distort your true self to maintain connection. This is where the story begins to darken, because not all mirrors reflect accurately. Some distort, some lie. Some show us only what we want to see, or only what others want us to be. And here is the terrible truth. We carry these early mirrors inside us for the rest of our lives. The face of the parent becomes the face of the lover, becomes the face of the friend, becomes the face of the self. We spend our lives searching for people who will mirror us the way we needed to be mirrored in childhood, or reenacting the failure of that mirroring, hoping somehow to get it right this time. The philosopher Jacques Lacan called this the mirror stage. He described how a child around 18 months old first recognizes its own reflection in a mirror and experiences a moment of jubilation. Finally, the child sees itself as a whole, unified being, no longer just a chaotic mess of sensations and needs, but an image, a complete form. But Lacan's insight was darker than it appears. He understood that this mirror image is fundamentally alienating. The child identifies with an image that is outside itself, that is not itself, that can never fully capture the lived experience of being. The child sees an idealized version of itself, stable, coherent, complete, and then spends the rest of its life trying to live up to this false image. The mirror creates the ego, but the ego is based on a misrecognition. It is a fiction we maintain through constant reference to external reflections, to the eyes of others, to the social mirrors that tell us who we are. Who are you? You are who you have been told you are. You are who you have seen yourself to be in the mirrors of other people's perceptions. And this is both the glory and the tragedy of human consciousness. Let us now turn to the realm of myth, where these truths have always been known, encoded in story and symbol. The Greek myth of Narcissus is not what we think it is. Yes, Narcissus falls in love with his own reflection, but read the original story from Ovid carefully. Narcissus does not know that the beautiful face in the water is his own. He believes it is another person, separate from himself. He reaches for it. He speaks to it. He falls in love with it as an other. Only at the end, when he finally understands that he has been seeing himself all along, does the tragedy complete itself. He realizes that the one he loves is unreachable not because it is separate, but because it is the same. The beloved and the lover are one, and this makes union impossible. He wastes away, crying, "What I desire I have. My riches make me poor." This is the paradox of the mirror. You cannot love yourself by looking at yourself, because love requires otherness, requires the gap between subject and object. But you also cannot know yourself without looking, without seeing yourself reflected. So we are caught in an impossible position. We need others to see ourselves, but in seeing ourselves in others, we lose them as others. They become mirrors, and mirrors cannot love us back. Unless, and this is the possibility we will explore later, unless we learn to see past the mirror, to recognize both the projection and the reality of the other beyond the projection. The Norse myths told of a different mirror, the well of Mimir, where Odin sacrificed his eye to drink the waters of wisdom and see the future. But what did he see in those waters? Not prophecy in the conventional sense. He saw himself. He saw all possible versions of himself, all the choices not taken, all the futures branching out from every decision. The well was a mirror of potentiality, showing him that the self is not one thing but infinite things, that identity is not fixed but fluid, shaped by every relationship, every encounter, every moment of reflection. The Chinese philosopher Zhuangzi told the story of dreaming he was a butterfly. When he awoke, he could not tell whether he was Zhuangzi who had dreamed of being a butterfly, or a butterfly now dreaming he was Zhuangzi. The boundaries between self and other, between reality and reflection, dissolved in that moment of uncertainty. All the ancient wisdom traditions understood. The self is not a solid entity. It is a process of reflection, a dance between interior and exterior, a relationship between the one who sees and the one who is seen. And all relationships are mirrors in which this dance plays out. By the Middle Ages, mirrors had become objects of both fascination and fear in European culture. They were said to trap souls, to reveal demons, to show the true nature hidden behind the mask. Mirror, mirror on the wall. The evil queen in Snow White does not want a neutral reflection. She wants a mirror that will confirm her narcissistic fantasy, that will tell her she is the fairest of them all. But the mirror tells the truth, and the truth destroys her. This is the power and the danger of the mirror. It reveals what we would rather not see. It shows us our aging, our imperfection, our mortality. It shows us that we are not who we pretend to be, not who we wish to be, but simply who we are. And other people, the people we love, the people we live with, the people we work alongside, they are the mirrors that reveal these truths most mercilessly. Your partner knows you better than you know yourself. They see your patterns, your defenses, your self-deceptions. They see the gap between your self-image and your behavior. And this is why intimate relationships are so difficult. They force us to confront the truth of ourselves as reflected in the eyes of someone who sees us completely. We can lie to ourselves. We cannot lie to the mirror. As we move from the ancient world into modernity, we see an explosion of mirrors. Glass becomes cheaper. Mirrors proliferate. By the 19th century, every home has mirrors. People see themselves constantly, checking their appearance, adjusting their image, becoming more and more conscious of themselves as visual objects. And something begins to shift in human psychology. We become more self-conscious, more anxious about appearance, more aware of the gap between interior experience and exterior image. The philosopher Michel Foucault would later call this surveillance, the sense of being constantly observed, constantly judged, constantly reflected back to yourself through the eyes of society. You begin to police yourself, to monitor your own behavior, to internalize the mirrors of social judgment. You become both the prisoner and the guard, watching yourself through the eyes of imagined others. This is the modern condition. We do not live in our experience. We live in our image of our experience as it might appear to others. We are always already outside ourselves, looking back, judging, adjusting, performing. And this brings us to our current moment, to the age of social media, where the mirror has become infinite and inescapable. But before we arrive at the present, we must descend deeper. We must go down into the darkness where the mirror shows us what we least want to see. We must enter the realm of the shadow, where all the rejected parts of ourselves wait to be projected onto others. We must understand that the mirror does not just reflect, it also inverts. And in that inversion, in that reversal, lies the key to understanding why we hate what we hate, why we love what we love, and why we can never truly see another person until we see ourselves completely. The mirror is calling. Can you hear it? There is a part of you that you have never met. It lives in the darkness behind your conscious awareness, in the regions of your psyche that you have exiled, denied, suppressed, forgotten. It contains everything you cannot admit about yourself, your selfishness, your rage, your jealousy, your cruelty, your weakness. But it also contains your repressed creativity, your wild sexuality, your authentic power, your deepest truths. Carl Jung called this the shadow. And here is the mechanism that will occupy us for the next portion of our journey. When you cannot face your shadow, when you cannot acknowledge these denied parts of yourself, you project them outward onto other people. You see in them what you refuse to see in yourself. They become the screen upon which you play the movie of your inner world. This is projection, and it is the invisible force that shapes every human relationship you will ever have. Let us begin with a simple example, a story that will illuminate the mechanism. Imagine a man, we will call him David, who prides himself on being rational, controlled, disciplined. He has built his identity around these qualities. He is the calm one in every crisis. He is the voice of reason in every argument. He does not lose his temper. He does not act impulsively. He is, by his own estimation, a model of self-control. But there is a problem. All the rage he has suppressed, all the impulsiveness he has denied, all the chaos he has refused to acknowledge in himself, it does not disappear. It cannot disappear. It goes into the shadow. And then David meets someone, perhaps a co-worker, perhaps a new neighbor, who is loud, emotional, spontaneous, disorganized, and David feels an immediate, visceral dislike. He cannot stand this person. Everything they do irritates him. Their laughter is too loud. Their emotions are too raw. Their way of being feels like a personal affront. David believes he dislikes this person because of who they are, but the truth is different. He dislikes this person because they embody the parts of himself he has rejected. They are the mirror showing him his own shadow. They are expressing the spontaneity and emotional freedom he has forbidden himself. The person David cannot stand is actually David himself, disguised as an other. This is negative projection. This is how enemies are made. But projection operates in both directions. It creates not just hatred, but also idealization. Consider the reverse. A woman, we will call her Sarah, who has always felt powerless, who learned in childhood to be accommodating, to suppress her own needs, to make herself small. She carries within her shadow an untapped reservoir of strength, assertiveness, personal power. But she cannot access it. She has been taught that these qualities are unfeminine, threatening, dangerous. And then Sarah meets someone, perhaps a charismatic leader, perhaps a confident romantic partner, who radiates the power she lacks, and she falls in love. Not with the person exactly, but with the projection of her own disowned power onto that person. She sees in them the strength she cannot yet claim for herself. This is positive projection. This is how gods and heroes are made. This is how we fall in love, not with people as they are, but with people as carriers of our unrealized potential. And here is the terrible beauty of it. These projections are not entirely false. We are drawn to people who actually do carry something we need to develop in ourselves. The person we idealize often genuinely possesses the quality we lack. The person we despise often genuinely exhibits the behavior we have repressed. But the intensity of our reaction, the overwhelming attraction or repulsion, that intensity is always a sign that we are seeing ourselves, not the other. Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." This is the first law of projection. If you have a strong emotional reaction to someone, either positive or negative, check for projection. The mirror is showing you something. The second law of projection is more subtle. We only project onto people what they can plausibly carry. A narcissist cannot project humility onto someone who is clearly arrogant. A coward cannot project courage onto someone who is visibly afraid. The person receiving the projection must have some small hook, some minor trait or behavior onto which we can hang our disowned self. This is why projection feels so real. The beloved really is attractive. The enemy really is annoying. But the overwhelming emotional charge, the sense that this person is the most beautiful or the most horrible person you have ever met, that charge comes from within. It comes from the shadow. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre understood this from a different angle. He wrote about the gaze, the experience of being seen by another person. When someone looks at you, you suddenly become aware of yourself as an object in their world. You feel judged, evaluated, defined from the outside. The other's gaze transforms you from a free subject into a fixed object. Sartre's famous line, "Hell is other people," is often misunderstood as simple misanthropy. But what he meant was this: other people force us to see ourselves as we are seen, to confront the gap between our self-perception and our external image. They hold up a mirror we cannot control. They see us in ways we do not see ourselves, and this is simultaneously terrifying and necessary. We need the mirror of the other to know ourselves. But the moment we see ourselves in that mirror, we are no longer just ourselves. We become split, divided, alienated from our own immediate experience. Let us go deeper into the mechanics of projection, into the unconscious process by which it operates. When you meet someone new, your brain performs an incredibly complex operation in fractions of a second. It scans their face, their posture, their tone of voice. It searches your memory banks for similar patterns from the past. It accesses emotional associations linked to those patterns. And then, before conscious thought even occurs, it generates a feeling: attraction, repulsion, trust, suspicion, comfort, threat. This is not rational. This is the unconscious mind recognizing resonances, seeing echoes, finding mirrors. You meet someone who has your father's eyes, and suddenly you feel either safe or anxious, depending on your relationship with your father. You hear someone use a phrase your ex-lover used, and your body tenses before you even know why. You encounter someone whose voice has the same cadence as your childhood bullies, and you instinctively recoil. The psychoanalysts call this transference, the unconscious redirection of feelings from one person to another. You transfer onto new relationships the emotional patterns from old relationships. The present becomes a screen for the past. The stranger becomes your mother, your father, your first love, your ancient wound. Freud discovered this while working with patients who would fall in love with him, hate him, idealize him, or feel betrayed by him, not because of who he actually was, but because he had become a stand-in for the significant figures in their past. The therapeutic relationship was a mirror reflecting their inner world, but here is what Freud understood. Transference is not limited to therapy. It is happening all the time, in every relationship, to everyone. You are always transferring. You are always seeing the present through the lens of the past. You are always projecting your inner drama onto the outer world. The people in your life are not just themselves. They are also your mother, your father, your sibling, your ex, your trauma, your hope, your fear, your denied self, your idealized self, your authentic self trying to emerge. They are all the mirrors you have ever looked into, superimposed, layered, kaleidoscopic. And now we arrive at the most crucial insight. Projection is not a flaw to be eliminated. It is an essential function of consciousness. It is how you learn about yourself. Think about it. You cannot see your own face without a mirror. You cannot see your own back. You cannot watch yourself from the outside. There are entire dimensions of your being that are invisible to you, hidden in the blind spot of subjectivity. But other people can see these dimensions. They see your facial expressions, your body language, your patterns of behavior. They experience the impact you have on them. And when they react to you, when they love you, challenge you, reject you, mirror you, they are giving you information about yourself that you could never access alone. Projection, then, is the psyche's way of making the invisible visible. By casting your shadow onto others, you externalize it. You can finally see it, examine it, work with it. The person you cannot stand becomes a teacher, showing you what you need to integrate. The person you idealize becomes a guide, showing you what you need to develop. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The darkness becomes conscious when we see it reflected in the mirror of relationships. But here is where the descent deepens, where the journey becomes truly difficult. Because recognizing projection intellectually is one thing. Actually taking it back, actually owning what you have placed onto others, that is another matter entirely. That requires you to face the most painful truths about yourself. Let me tell you a story about a woman I once knew. We will call her Maria. Maria had been married for 15 years, and throughout that time, she had felt increasingly resentful of her husband. He was, in her eyes, emotionally distant, unavailable, unwilling to engage deeply with her feelings. She believed he was the problem. If only he would change, if only he would open up, then the marriage would improve. Maria spent years trying to fix him, to make him more emotionally present. She read books on communication. She suggested therapy. She explained again and again what she needed from him, and nothing changed. Until one day, in a moment of devastating clarity, Maria realized something. She was accusing her husband of being emotionally unavailable, while being completely unavailable to herself. She had been so focused on his feelings, or lack thereof, that she had lost touch with her own. She had projected onto him her own dissociation from her inner life. The mirror cracked. She saw herself, and in that moment everything shifted. Not because her husband suddenly changed, he didn't, but because she stopped needing him to carry her projection. She took responsibility for her own emotional availability. She started feeling her own feelings instead of trying to extract them from him. And strangely, paradoxically, as she took back her projection, her husband began to change. Not because she was trying to change him, but because she had stopped relating to him as a mirror and started relating to him as a person. She saw him clearly for the first time. This is the alchemy of projection. When you take it back, when you withdraw the image you have placed onto the other, you free both yourself and them. You reclaim your disowned parts, and simultaneously, you allow the other to be who they actually are, rather than who you need them to be. But this process is excruciating, because taking back a projection means admitting that you were wrong. Not wrong about the other's flaws, they may genuinely be flawed, but wrong about the intensity, the charge, the meaning you gave to those flaws. It means admitting that your mother was not a monster, just a wounded human. That your ex was not the perfect soulmate, just a person carrying your projection. That your enemy is not evil, just a mirror showing you your shadow. It means giving up the stories you have told yourself about who hurt you, who saved you, who abandoned you, who completed you. It means standing alone with yourself, without the mirror, without the projection, face to face with the naked truth of your own psyche. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke wrote about love. For one human being to love another, that is perhaps the most difficult of all our tasks, the ultimate, the last test and proof, the work for which all other work is but preparation. Why is love the most difficult task? Because genuine love requires seeing the other as they are, not as a projection screen for your needs. It requires distinguishing between the fantasy you have created and the reality that stands before you. It requires the death of idealization and the birth of authentic relationship. And this death, This letting go of projection feels like loss, because you are losing the version of the person you fell in love with. You are losing the parent you wish you had, the partner you dreamed of, the friend who understood you completely. You are losing the mirror that reflected back to you the most flattering version of yourself. But what you gain, if you can endure this death, is something infinitely more valuable. You gain reality. You gain the actual presence of another consciousness, irreducible to your projections, mysterious in their otherness, beautiful in their separateness. You gain relationship. Now let us examine the darker forms of projection, the places where the mirror becomes a weapon. In group psychology, we see projection operate on a massive scale. Nations project their shadow onto enemy nations. Religious groups project evil onto heretics. Political movements project the cause of all problems onto scapegoats, immigrants, minorities, elites, outsiders. This is the same mechanism operating at the collective level. A group that cannot acknowledge its own aggression projects that aggression onto an external enemy. A society that cannot face its own corruption creates a fantasy of external threat. A culture that cannot integrate its own darkness finds someone else to blame. And then war begins. Not because of real differences, though differences may exist, but because entire populations have projected their shadows onto the other and convinced themselves that if they can just eliminate the other, they will eliminate their own inner darkness. This is the mechanism of genocide, of ethnic cleansing, of holy war. This is the ultimate expression of projection as violence. Jung predicted this. In the 1930s, watching the rise of fascism in Europe, he understood that the German collective shadow was being projected onto Jews, communists, foreigners. He knew that when a shadow that large, that denied, suddenly erupts, it creates catastrophe. He wrote, "We cannot change anything unless we accept it. We cannot change our darkness by projecting it onto others. We can only transform it by acknowledging it, by owning it, by bringing it into consciousness. But there is another form of projection, subtler and more insidious, the projection of goodness. Sometimes we project not our shadow, but our light. We place our divinity, our power, our potential onto others, onto gurus, leaders, celebrities, saviors. We make them gods. We worship them. We give them authority over our lives. And then we resent them for having the power we gave them. This is spiritual bypass. This is the abdication of personal responsibility disguised as devotion. It is the refusal to claim your own light by placing it on someone else's altar. Every cult operates on this mechanism. The followers project their inner wisdom onto the guru and then become dependent on external authority. The guru, in turn, often begins to believe the projection, begins to think he really is enlightened, really is special, really is beyond human limitation. The mirror creates both the victim and the perpetrator, and the only way out is for each person to take back their projection, for the follower to reclaim their wisdom, and for the guru to acknowledge their humanity. We are now standing at the edge of the abyss, looking into the deepest mirror of all, the mirror of romantic love. No other relationship triggers projection as intensely as romantic partnership, because romantic love activates the most primal patterns: the infant's need for the mother, the child's need for mirroring, the adolescent's search for identity, the adult's longing for wholeness. When you fall in love, you are not actually falling in love with the person in front of you. You are falling in love with a cocktail of projections. You see your idealized self, your missing parts, your anima or animus, Jung's terms for the inner feminine or masculine, your unhealed wounds seeking healing, your childhood needs seeking fulfillment. The beloved becomes a mirror showing you everything you think you lack, and this is beautiful. This is the mystery of romantic love, that it can trigger such intense transformation, such rapid growth, such profound self-discovery. But it is also dangerous. Because when the inevitable disillusionment comes, when the projection begins to fail, when you realize your partner is not your savior, not your perfect match, not the completion of your soul, what happens then? Most relationships end here. The projection shatters and people conclude they chose the wrong person. They leave and search for someone new to carry the projection. They repeat the pattern over and over, never understanding that they are running from the mirror itself. But some people, a few brave souls, stay. They endure the death of projection. They grieve the fantasy. And then they begin the real work, learning to love the actual person, with all their imperfections, all their limitations, all their humanity. This is mature love. This is what lies beyond the mirror. But getting there requires descending through hell. It requires facing every wound, every disappointment, every disillusionment. It requires seeing clearly that no other person can complete you, save you, heal you. It requires taking responsibility for your own wholeness. And now we must speak of technology, of how the mirror has evolved in our digital age. Social media is a mirror on steroids. Every post, every photo, every carefully crafted status update is an attempt to control your reflection, to manage how others see you. You curate your image. You present only the best angles, the happiest moments, the most impressive achievements. And then you wait. You wait for the likes, the comments, the validating responses that tell you your mirror image is acceptable. But here is the trap. The more you live in your image, the more alienated you become from your actual experience. You begin to see your life through the lens of how it will look to others. You attend events not to enjoy them, but to photograph them. You achieve things not for the satisfaction, but for the announcement. You become the curated self, the performed self, the self that exists only as a reflection in the eyes of a digital audience. And the shadow grows stronger, because everything you don't post, your failures, your pain, your ordinariness, your authentic struggles, gets pushed deeper into unconsciousness. The gap between image and reality widens. The mirror lies more convincingly, until you no longer know who you are without the mirror, until your sense of self depends entirely on external validation, on the constant feedback loop of being seen, liked, approved. This is not connection. This is addiction to reflection. But here, at the darkest point of the descent, we find the seed of transformation, because the shadow cannot remain in darkness forever. Eventually, it demands to be seen. Eventually, the projections become too painful to maintain. Eventually, the mirror cracks, and you are forced to look at what lies behind the reflection. This is the crisis that precedes awakening. This is the dark night of the soul. This is the moment when all your relationships seem to fail, when you can no longer avoid seeing your patterns, when the universe itself seems to be holding up a mirror and demanding that you look. What do you see when the mirror cracks? You see yourself, not the image, not the projection, not the curated self or the shadow self or the idealized self, just yourself, exactly as you are, raw, real, imperfect, complete. And from this moment of brutal honesty, something new can emerge. This is where the journey turns. This is where descent becomes ascent. This is where we begin the return to light, carrying the treasures of the darkness with us. There is a moment in the life of consciousness when the mirror becomes transparent, not broken, not discarded, but transparent, so that you can see both the reflection and the reality beyond it, both the projection and the actual other, both who you think you are and who you really are simultaneously. This is integration. This is awakening. This is the beginning of authentic relationship. Let us begin the ascent by understanding what happens when you recognize projection for what it is. Imagine you are watching a movie in a theater. The images on the screen seem real, alive, compelling. You forget you are watching a projection. You become absorbed in the story, emotionally invested in the characters, reacting as though it were all happening to you. But then, suddenly you become aware of the projector behind you. You hear its mechanical whir. You notice the beam of light casting images onto the screen. You realize that everything you have been watching is not happening on the screen at all. It is coming from the projector, from the source, from behind you. The screen has not changed. The images continue to play. But now you know they are projections. You can see both the movie and the mechanism creating the movie. This dual awareness, this ability to see both the content of experience and the process generating that experience. This is consciousness becoming conscious of itself. This is what happens when you recognize projection in relationships. You do not stop seeing your partner's flaws, or your friend's annoying habits, or your parents' limitations. The screen does not go blank, but you understand that the intensity of your reaction, the emotional charge, the story you tell about these behaviors, that comes from you. It is your projection, your movie, your narrative, and in that recognition, something loosens. The grip of projection weakens. Space appears between you and your reaction. You can choose a different response. Carl Jung described this as withdrawing projections. He said it is one of the most difficult psychological tasks a human can undertake. Why? Because projection feels real. Your partner really is frustrating. Your boss really is difficult. Your enemy really is wrong. Taking back projection does not mean denying external reality. It means recognizing that your inner reality is coloring external reality, that you are seeing through a lens, that the mirror is showing you yourself. And the practice is simple, though not easy. Every time you have a strong emotional reaction to someone, pause. Ask yourself, what part of me is this person reflecting? If someone's selfishness enrages you, look for the ways you are selfish. If someone's vulnerability makes you uncomfortable, examine your own defended heart. If someone's confidence threatens you, acknowledge your own insecurity. If someone's success triggers jealousy, recognize your own unfulfilled potential. The mirror never lies, but you must be willing to look. The Buddhist tradition has a practice called metta, loving-kindness meditation. In this practice, you begin by directing compassion toward yourself, then gradually extend it outward, to loved ones, to neutral people, to difficult people, finally to all beings. But here is the psychological truth beneath the spiritual practice. When you can offer compassion to the person you despise, when you can see their suffering as human suffering rather than as a moral failing, you are taking back your projection. You are recognizing that they are not the embodiment of evil, just a human being struggling with their shadow, just as you struggle with yours. This does not mean condoning harmful behavior. It means seeing clearly, without the distortion of projection. And paradoxically, this clarity gives you more power, not less. Because when you are not wasting energy maintaining projections, you can respond to situations as they actually are. You can set boundaries without hatred. You can leave relationships without bitterness. You can love without losing yourself. You can see the other as other. The philosopher Emmanuel Levinas spent his life contemplating the face of the other. He argued that when you truly encounter another person's face, when you really see them, you experience an ethical demand that precedes all rationality. The face says, "Do not kill me. Recognize my existence, acknowledge my irreducible otherness." But we rarely see the actual face. We see our projection. We see what we want to see, what we fear to see, what we need to see. The face becomes a screen, and we miss the ethical encounter entirely. Levinas called this the face-to-face, the moment when projection dissolves and you stand in the presence of genuine alterity, genuine otherness. This is the foundation of ethics, of justice, of love. You cannot harm someone whose face you truly see, because in that seeing, you recognize their humanity as absolute as your own. This is what taking back projection makes possible. genuine ethical encounter, real seeing, actual love. Now let us explore what happens to relationships when projection is recognized and withdrawn. First, there is often a period of disorientation. The person you thought you knew suddenly seems different. Your partner is not the idealized prince or princess, but a flawed human. Your parent is not the monster or the saint, but a complex person shaped by their own wounds. Your friend is not your mirror image, but someone with their own separate existence. This can feel like loss, because you are losing the fantasy. You are losing the story you told yourself about this person and your relationship with them. But what you gain is presence, real presence. The actual person, here, now, in all their complicated humanity. And this opens a new possibility. Instead of relating to your projection of them, you can relate to them. Instead of trying to get them to be who you need them to be, you can discover who they actually are. Instead of using them as a mirror, you can meet them as a fellow consciousness. This is what the psychologist Martin Buber called an I-thou relationship, as opposed to an I-it relationship. In I-it, the other person is an object, a means to your ends, a role they play in your internal drama. In I-thou, the other person is a subject, a whole being, a mystery that can never be fully grasped or controlled. Most of our relationships are I-it. We use people, not always maliciously, but functionally. They serve purposes, they meet our needs, fulfill our expectations, play their assigned roles in our life narrative. But thou is different. It is rare. It requires you to approach the other without agenda, without projection, with pure presence. And in that encounter, something sacred emerges. You touch reality directly. You experience communion. Let me give you a concrete example of what this transformation looks like. Consider a man who has spent decades resenting his father. The father was cold, distant, critical, never satisfied with anything the son achieved. The son carried this wound into all his relationships, always seeking approval, never feeling good enough. This is projection. The son has internalized the critical father and now projects him onto authority figures, romantic partners, even himself. The inner critic is the father's voice, echoing in his mind. But then, one day, the son sits with his aging father and asks questions. Really asks. Not accusations, not demands for apology, but genuine curiosity. What was your life like? What did your father do to you? What were you afraid of? What did you dream of becoming? And the father, now old, now vulnerable, begins to speak. He tells stories the son has never heard. Stories of poverty, of war, of his own abusive father, of dreams abandoned, of love never expressed. And the son sees. His father was not a monster. His father was a wounded man, doing the best he could with the consciousness he had. His father's coldness was not rejection. It was the only way he knew to be strong. His criticism was not hatred. It was the only way he knew to prepare his son for a harsh world. The projection collapses. The father is still imperfect. The wounds are still real. But the story changes. And in that change, forgiveness becomes possible. Not because the father earns it, but because the son no longer needs to carry the projection. He takes it back. He owns his own critic. He recognizes that he internalized his father's voice and has been doing to himself what his father did to him. And in taking it back, he frees both of them. This is the essence of psychological and spiritual maturity, taking back your projections one by one until you stand alone with yourself, responsible for your own experience, no longer blaming anyone for what you feel. But here is the paradox. Only when you stop needing others to complete you do you become capable of genuine intimacy. Only when you stop using relationships as mirrors do real relationships become possible. The mystics understood this. The Sufi poet Rumi wrote, "Your task is not to seek for love. but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. The barriers are projections. They are the walls you have built to protect yourself from being seen, from seeing yourself, from feeling your own pain. And every person you blame, every person you idealize, every person you use as a mirror, they are bricks in those walls. Taking back projection is dismantling the walls. It is exposing yourself to reality, to love, to truth. Now we must address the question that has been hovering over this entire exploration. If everyone is a mirror, if all relationships are projections, then is genuine knowledge of another person possible? Can we ever truly know the other? Or are we doomed to see only ourselves reflected everywhere? This is perhaps the deepest mystery of relationship. And the answer is both. Paradoxically, simultaneously, both. Yes, you always see through the lens of your own consciousness. You always interpret the other through your own categories, your own experience, your own projections. You can never fully escape your subjectivity, but, and this is crucial, your subjectivity can expand. It can become more flexible, more aware, more porous. Through the practice of recognizing and withdrawing projections, through the discipline of seeing clearly, through the humility of acknowledging your blind spots, you can gradually see more of the other and less of yourself. The mirror can become clearer, not perfectly clear, that is impossible, but clearer. And in those moments when the mirror becomes very clear, when projection is minimal, when your consciousness is quiet enough to simply receive the other's presence, in those moments, something miraculous happens. You experience genuine meeting, genuine communion. The boundaries between self and other do not disappear, but they become permeable. You feel what they feel. You understand what they understand. You touch, briefly, the reality of another consciousness. This is empathy in its deepest sense. Not sympathy, not projection, but the actual experience of another subjectivity. And this is made possible only by recognizing projection and learning to distinguish between the mirror and the reality beyond the mirror. Let us now turn to the most radical insight of this entire exploration, an insight that will reshape how you understand yourself and every person you know. Here it is. You are made of mirrors. Not just that you use mirrors or see yourself in mirrors, but that you are literally constituted by them. Your sense of self is an assemblage of all the reflections you have ever received from others. Think about it. You know you are funny because people laughed at your jokes. You know you are smart because teachers praised your intelligence. You know you are attractive because lovers desired you. You know you are worthy because parents loved you, or you doubt your worth because they did not. Every aspect of your identity has been shaped by how others saw you, reflected you, named you. The developmental psychologist Lev Vygotsky understood this. He showed that all higher cognitive functions, language, reasoning, self-awareness, first appear in social interaction before becoming internalized. You learn to think by internalizing dialogue. You learn to see yourself by internalizing others' gazes. The philosopher George Herbert Mead called this the social self. He argued that the self is not a private internal entity, but a social structure, an internalized conversation between different perspectives you have absorbed from others. Who is the you that you think of as yourself? It is your mother's voice, your father's judgment, your teacher's praise, your friend's laughter, your lover's gaze, your enemy's criticism. It is every mirror you have ever stood before, layered inside you, creating the sense of a unified self. But here is the liberating truth. If the self is socially constructed, it can be reconstructed. If your identity is built from mirrors, you can choose new mirrors. You can seek out people who reflect back to you your highest potential rather than your deepest wounds. You can become the mirror for others that you wish someone had been for you. You can ultimately become your own mirror, observing yourself with compassion, reflecting yourself with accuracy, seeing yourself with love. This brings us to the practice of self-reflection, of turning the mirror inward. Meditation, journaling, therapy, contemplation. These are all forms of creating an internal mirror. You step back from your immediate experience and observe it. You become both subject and object, both the one who experiences and the one who watches the experience. This is metacognition. This is consciousness reflecting on itself. And here is what you discover when you practice this. The observer is not separate from the observed. You cannot find a fixed self watching your thoughts and feelings. Instead, you find a process, a flow of awareness in which thoughts arise, feelings move, sensations appear and disappear. The self you thought was solid turns out to be fluid. The mirror you thought was reflecting a real object turns out to be reflecting only other reflections, images reflecting images, consciousness reflecting on itself in an infinite regress. This is what the Buddha discovered 2,500 years ago. He called it anatta, non-self. Not that there is no self at all, but that the self is not what we think it is. It is not a fixed entity, but a dynamic process. Not a thing, but a relationship. Not a noun, but a verb. You are not a person who has relationships. You are relationship. You are the space where reflections meet, where consciousness encounters itself through the mirror of otherness. And this realization, this understanding that the self is relational, fluid, constructed through mirrors, does not diminish you, it liberates you. Because if the self is not fixed, it can change. If identity is constructed, it can be reconstructed. If you have been shaped by mirrors, you can choose different mirrors going forward. You are not doomed to repeat the patterns of the past. You are not trapped in the identity you have been given. You can, through awareness and intention, reshape yourself. This is the promise of psychological growth, of spiritual awakening, of human potential. You can see the mirrors clearly, recognize the projections, take back what you have placed onto others, and become more fully yourself. Not the self you were told to be, not the self you see in the distorted mirrors of social expectation, but the self that exists beneath all projections, all identities, all images, the raw awareness that is simply here, now, alive, conscious, free. But there is one final twist, one more layer of the mirror to explore before we conclude our journey. What if consciousness itself is a mirror? What if the entire universe is reflecting itself to itself through the experience of sentient beings? This is the vision of mysticism, of non-dual philosophy, of the perennial wisdom tradition. The idea that there is only one consciousness, appearing as many, experiencing itself through infinite perspectives. In this view, when you look into another person's eyes, you are not seeing an other at all. You are seeing yourself, not your individual self, but the universal self that is looking out from behind all eyes, experiencing reality through all forms. The other person is a mirror, yes, but not a mirror reflecting your ego. A mirror reflecting the cosmic consciousness that you both are, that everything is. This is the ultimate recognition. I am you, you are me. We are all reflections of the same infinite awareness, temporarily forgetting our unity so that we can experience the joy of rediscovering it. This is what the ancient Vedic seers meant when they said, Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that. The person you perceive as separate from you is actually the same self, the same consciousness, the same divine essence that is looking out from behind your own eyes. And if this is true, even if it is only a metaphor, a useful fiction, it changes everything. Because then there are no others. There is only the self, playing at being separate, using the mirror of relationship to know itself more fully. Every encounter is God meeting God. Every relationship is consciousness exploring consciousness. Every moment of genuine seeing is the universe recognizing itself. But whether you accept this mystical vision or not, the practical truth remains. The quality of your relationships determines the quality of your life, and the quality of your relationships depends on your ability to see clearly, to recognize projection, to take it back, to meet the other as they truly are. This is the work. This is the practice. This is the never-ending task of being human, to see yourself in others without losing sight of their otherness, to use relationship as a mirror without making it only a mirror, to love without projection, without idealization, without denial, to stand in the presence of another consciousness with openness, honesty, vulnerability, and courage. This is what it means to be awake in relationship. This is what it means to love consciously. And it begins with the simple recognition: the face looking back at you from the mirror of relationship is always, in part, your own face. The question is, can you bear to see it? Can you bear to see yourself completely? Your light and your darkness, your beauty and your ugliness, your wisdom and your foolishness? Can you look into the mirror without flinching? We have traveled far together tonight. From the first obsidian mirrors of ancient Anatolia to the mirror neurons firing in your brain at this very moment. From the face of the mother reflecting back the infant's existence to the faces of lovers, enemies, and strangers reflecting back the hidden dimensions of your soul. From the psychological mechanisms of projection to the mystical vision of universal consciousness. And now we stand at the end of our journey, which is also the beginning. Because the insight we have gained is not something to be merely understood. It is something to be lived, practiced, embodied in every relationship you enter from this moment forward. Let me leave you with a final image, a final story, a final mirror to contemplate. Imagine that you have spent your entire life in a hall of mirrors, one of those carnival attractions where every surface reflects, distorts, multiplies your image. Everywhere you look, you see yourself, but always changed, always strange, tall and thin in one mirror, short and wide in another, fractured into pieces in one, multiplied into infinity in another. You have become so accustomed to these distorted reflections that you have forgotten what you actually look like. You have forgotten that you are not the image in the mirror, but the living presence standing before it. And then, one day, you find the exit. You step out of the hall of mirrors into clear sunlight, and for the first time, you experience yourself directly, without the mediation of reflection. You feel the sun on your skin, the breath in your lungs, the aliveness of your own presence. You realize, I am not the image. I am the consciousness that sees the image. I am not the reflection. I am the light. This is awakening. This is freedom. This is what lies beyond the mirror. But here is the paradox. To reach this direct experience of yourself, you needed all those mirrors. You needed every distorted reflection, every painful projection, every relationship that showed you who you were not, in order to discover who you are. The mirror was not the enemy. The mirror was the teacher. So what do you do now? How do you live with this knowledge? You practice seeing every day, in every interaction. When you feel irritated by someone, pause. Ask, what is this person showing me about myself? When you feel enchanted by someone, pause. Ask, what am I projecting onto this person that I need to reclaim for myself? When you feel unseen, pause. Ask, am I seeing myself? Am I witnessing my own experience with compassion? This is the practice. Not achieving some perfect state of non-projection, that is impossible while you remain human, but gradually increasing your awareness, your clarity, your ability to distinguish between mirror and reality. And as you do this, something beautiful happens. Your relationships become clearer, more honest, more real. You stop needing people to be who they are not. You stop resenting them for not meeting needs they were never meant to fulfill. You stop trying to change them and start appreciating them exactly as they are. And in this space of acceptance, of presence, of genuine seeing, love becomes possible. Not the desperate, needy, projective love of the ego, but the spacious, free, conscious love of awakened awareness. The mirror of relationships has shown us something profound. You are both more and less than you think you are. Less in the sense that the fixed self you imagine, the solid, unchanging identity, does not exist. It is a construction, a pattern of mirrors, a story you tell yourself. But more in the sense that you are not limited to this small self. You are connected to every person you have ever met through the invisible threads of projection and reflection. You contain multitudes. You are a multiplicity pretending to be a unity. You are the universe experiencing itself through one particular set of eyes. And every person you encounter is another set of eyes through which the same universe looks back at you. The future of human consciousness, if there is to be a future, depends on our ability to see each other clearly, to recognize projection, to take back our shadows, to meet each other with presence rather than with fear, with openness rather than with defense, with love rather than with hate. The problems we face as a species, war, oppression, environmental destruction, technological danger, all stem from our inability to see the other as fully human, as equally real, as another version of ourselves. We project our evil onto them. We make them into enemies. We convince ourselves that if we could just eliminate them, we would eliminate our own darkness. But the darkness is within. It always has been. And the only way to transform it is to see it clearly, to acknowledge it, to integrate it. This is the work of the next stage of human evolution, becoming conscious of our projections, taking responsibility for our inner worlds, learning to see each other without distortion. This is how we move from tribalism to global consciousness, from projection to presence, from mirror to meeting. And so I ask you one final time, when you look into the eyes of another person, whose face do you truly see? You know the answer now. You see yourself. And yet, if you look deeply enough, if you see clearly enough, you also see something beyond yourself. You see the mystery of consciousness itself peering back at you from another form. You see the infinite in the finite, the eternal in the temporal, the one in the many. You see the mirror becoming transparent, the reflection dissolving, the light meeting light. Tonight, go home and look in a physical mirror. Look at your face. Really look at it. See the lines, the imperfections, the signs of time and experience. And then look deeper. Behind the image, beneath the reflection, there is a presence looking back, a consciousness witnessing itself. That consciousness is not limited to the face in the mirror. It is looking out from every face, experiencing reality through every form, reflecting itself through the infinite mirror of existence. You are that consciousness. I am that consciousness. Everyone you have ever known or will know is that consciousness. And the mirror of relationships is the means by which we remember this truth, not through abstract philosophy, but through the lived experience of seeing ourselves in others and others in ourselves, until the distinction no longer seems to matter, until there is only seeing, only presence, only love. Thank you for walking this path with me tonight. Thank you for looking into the mirror with courage and honesty. Thank you for being willing to see. The journey does not end here. It begins here. Every person you meet tomorrow is another mirror, another opportunity to see more clearly, to love more deeply, to awaken more fully. Will you look? Will you see? Will you recognize the face looking back at you? The mirror is waiting, and it has infinite reflections left to show you, echoes of the ancients,